Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jami Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. It's my pleasure to welcome today's guest, Cindy Goldrich, a mental health counselor and ADHD executive function specialist whose compassionate approach has transformed countless families' lives. With a master's in education and counseling psychology from Columbia University, Cindy brings both academic expertise and practical wisdom to her work with parents, teachers, and students. Cindy's philosophy is refreshingly straightforward. Parent the child you have, not the one you expected or others say you should have. This perspective forms the foundation of her renowned Calm and Connected workshop series, which has helped families worldwide create more peaceful homes and develop realistic expectations. As the author of 8 Keys to Parenting Children with ADHD and co-author of ADHD Executive Function and Behavioral Challenges in the Classroom, Cindy combines her clinical insights with accessible strategies for real-world application. Her ADHD Executive Function Parent Coach Academy and Teacher Training Academy have equipped professionals across the globe with tools to support children with unique learning needs. Trained with industry leaders Dr. Edward Hallowell and Dr. Ross Green, Cindy serves on multiple CHAD committees and has been a sought-after speaker at prestigious conferences worldwide. Today, she'll share her expertise on nurturing children through understanding structure and empathy. And we're also going to put a bend towards those grandparents who are listening. Wow, Cindy, that's quite an impressive bio. Thank you so much for taking time to be here.
Thank you, Jami. It's my pleasure. It's so funny hearing all of that and knowing where it all started, but thank you.
Oh, well, I love that. And before we continue, I want you to share where you are right now. So when people hear a little bit of background noise, they will completely identify.
Absolutely. So I'm grandma. I'm Gigi to an adorable 19-month-old who I unexpectedly am babysitting for today, which is my pleasure, but she did have a doctor's appointment, so she's in with her mom at the doctor's appointment now while I'm sitting out in the waiting room of the pediatric office. So hence the beautiful balloons.
Yeah, nice. So I actually I forgot to turn on my do not disturb. So I'm going to do that because those of us with ADHD squirrel and a ding goes off, and normally I'm really good at it. But so I keep it real, by the way, Cindy, so that my guests can be authentically themselves. And I just wanted to share that my middle daughter took a class on the role of grandparents and women as we age, and how just so instrumental and critical a grandmother role is in the life of her grandchildren. And aside, my grandmother was my best friend. I was her only grandchild, and I lived with her on and off throughout my life, and she is hugely an inspiration for me. My grandmother did not have ADHD, but I do, and we talked a little bit about it. Cindy, I want to hear how you got into this work, so let's start with that.
Sure. So just real briefly, I do not have ADHD myself. However, it runs all throughout my family. And I had a mental health degree, as you mentioned, but we didn't learn about ADHD back in the 80s when we were becoming mental health counselors. And I just felt like I didn't know enough to support the people around me. So I sought specific education on ADHD, and I learned how to be an ADHD coach. My original practice was working with high school and college kids. But I quickly found that, you know what? If the parents don't know what the parents don't know, I wasn't getting very far with the kids because I was putting them back into the same family system.
Mm-hmm.
And parents out of love and logic and intuition and all the good stuff, but that doesn't mean they have the specific tools and understanding to understand the neurobiology of ADHD. So I learned all of that, and then I became a parent coach. That didn't really exist 20 years ago, ADHD parent coaching, but that's what I did. I developed my Common Connected program, and I worked with thousands of parents all over the world. And then people started reaching out to me and saying, "This is what I want to do." They were therapists and teachers and counselors and passionate parents whose kids were grown. And so I said, okay. So I started my ADHD Parent Coach Academy, and I started training coaches worldwide. But I also found that, you know who else doesn't know? The teachers. The teachers don't know
Mm-hmm.
what the teachers don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
so these kids that are going to school have wonderful, well meaning teachers who care but don't have the knowledge. So I started my Teacher Trainer Academy. And my daughter, who's actually an elementary special ed teacher for the last 10 years, she co wrote my second book with me. And I travel the country. I go into school districts and I teach all the teachers, and I have my online teacher training program where teachers come and they learn how to work with their staff, and they learn how to train other teachers in their neighboring districts or in tutoring centers or wherever else. Because, Jami, I believe in a full circle of support.
Right.
Parents need to understand what goes on at school. Teachers need to understand what goes on at home. And they all need to
Absolutely.
have the skills to understand the social and emotional impact that ADHD and executive function challenges have on learning and motivation and behavior, and in fact, the whole family system.
You
So,
are you are absolutely so spot on with that, and it was so wise of you to connect that you can't just pick a child up and give them the therapy if you're not giving the tools to everybody who supports them. I was called to read a quote to you that I just came across last week. That every time I read it, still it gives me chills. And as someone who's educating teachers, I wanted to share it with you and the listeners, and then go back to this.
sure.
It's a Neil deGrasse quote. You
Yeah,
may or may not have heard it. It's ADHD is not a disorder; it's a phenotype, a
yeah.
different kind of wiring. People with ADHD carry the OG genetic traits that made them elite hunters, gatherers, and scouts in ancestral times. Fast reflexes, heightened sensitivity, scanning attention, and quick adaptability were all superpowers in natural environments. It only gets labeled a disorder when you're born into a modern world that forces you to sit still for 8 hours a day, memorize irrelevant information, and conform to systems designed for industrial efficiency, not human brilliance. ADHD isn't the problem, the environment is. So I love that, just tied so well into what you just said.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And it really ties into, as you know, this a philosophy of mine, which is parent the child you have. Not the
Mm-hmm.
child you thought you'd have, not the child you wish you'd have, but that child you're blessed with. And in doing that, what I mean is get to know that child's uniqueness and their wonder and their joy. And it may be so different from you. I don't have ADHD, as I mentioned. I'm more of a type A, I just get
Mm-hmm.
things done. But the people around me need to do things differently, and that's okay. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about how we work with each other, how we respect each other, and how we create the environments that suits us both.
Sure.
So,
Well, a lot of our audience are going to be grandparents. Not everybody. I am actually not a grandparent, but we run into family dynamics, right? I even remember when my mother-in-law would say our kids, or my, like my kids, and I was like, they're my kids, right? But really it takes a village, and they're because, especially, it can be an in-law dynamic, and it be a mother-daughter dynamic. But how do you recommend a grandparent who's observing, I think that my grandchild has ADHD, or my grandchild has ADHD, and I don't think my adult child is really serving them, in the best way they can. How would you recommend, with your expertise, that we bring in the role of grandparent?
yeah, that's such a great question. I'll answer it a few different ways. First of all, you know, being the grandparent, and I've only had 19 months of this, so I'm not an expert yet. But what's interesting is you're seeing both the dynamic of the parent of the child parenting the child and yourself still parenting your own child who's now the parent. So it is multi-level. It is
Mhm,
so multifaceted. And so when your own child may not recognize the ADHD or the potential ADHD of that child, you approach it like you approach anything else, with curiosity and empathy.
mhm,
And you sort of, when I work with the teachers, I say, when you're dealing with a parent who may be either in denial or unaware that their own child has ADHD, you can't just say, oh, well, Johnny's not doing this and Johnny's not doing this. You want to talk to them in terms of developmental norms. So you might say, in my years of experience, I've noticed that at this age, a lot of the kids are doing this and Johnny's doing that. I wonder why. I wonder how it's impacting him. I wonder if there's anything that we want to learn about this, so
mhm,
that it's coming from not a judgment place, but the curiosity place of let's learn more. And
mhm,
if what Johnny's doing seems more typical of ADHD or just, the neurodivergence, then what are the implications of that? Because it's not necessarily bad, it just means different.
right.
I know the quote that you read. One of the things I always say is that ADHD, I don't look at as a disorder. I look at it as a difference with challenges. And
Mhm,
yes, a lot of the challenges are because we have the mismatch of environment. But some of
mhm,
the challenges because we don't understand it. We
sure,
need to understand things like processing speed and working memory and, initiation, all these different things that are impacting. So I hope
sure.
that answers it.
Yeah, it does. I like that coming from the place of curiosity. I also know that there is this, as much as I personally hate to admit it, there's this, I pass this on to my child, and there's a little bit of shame, which is, one of the reasons that I am doing this podcast, because I am really trying to destigmatize ADHD. And, and I also want to highlight that I did an interview yesterday with another therapist who said, who also had ADHD. And I like to ask people if they could, press a button and turn off their ADHD, would they? And it's really nice to hear for most adults that the answer would be absolutely not. But growing up, yes, yes, I would have definitely wanted to take that button and turn it off. So let me ask you this question. Because a parent is likely to feel judged, whether it's their own parent or definitely an in-law, how do we take that into consideration? Um, even approaching like something doesn't seem right. Even the I've observed that other kids are doing this, but yours isn't. Like it's going to be hard not to hear that from that lens.
I hear what you're saying, and I really do think it depends on, and this is what I do so much of, the relationship between the parent and the child. And
Mhm,
again, you're talking about your adult child.
mhm,
Because if you can come in it from the place of, I notice that there's a difference, I'm curious. Like, I'm not saying it's bad or good. It's just we need to pay attention to it. So what
mhm,
about that? You know, that that may actually be a really wonderful trait, that look how curious your child is. And it's so unusual to be so curious about this when everyone else is just playing in the playground. So
mhm,
it's not necessarily a negative. And that's what we need to work on in our own relationship with our child, that, hey, I'm coming to you with my own curiosity too, not my judgment. So if
mhm,
you're hearing judgment first, that's a dynamic between you and I we need to work on too, because I think you want me to be supportive and helpful, and I also need to be honest. So if we're always worried about that layer of, is she going to hear me judgmentally, then I'm filtering so much, right?
mhm. That's great, and also pointing out that those of us with ADHD tend to be a lot more sensitive to any sort of perceived rejection or any sort of criticism. So that's going to especially be a delicate conversation.
Mhm.
What do you think? And as you were talking, I thought might be a good idea for those grandparents to get educated on the good, the bad, and the ugly of ADHD, because there are so many wonderful traits. And I think, I always talk about are you familiar with the sandwich? I use that with my kids all the time.
Of course, of course.
Okay. I'll let you, since you're the therapist, describe the sandwich, because not everyone knows it.
Yeah. Assuming we're talking about the same
I'm
sandwich,
sure we are.
it's you want to say something positive,
Hmm.
and then you want to do the correction, and then you want to say something positive again.
Right.
Because sometimes it is hard to hear those negative things. So we want to set the stage and still go back and remind and say, hey, but that's just this. It's the
Hmm.
big stuff. It's the bread on the outside that is really the main thing. But we got to talk about that little thing in the middle.
Yeah, that meat, that's where the sandwich comes from.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how do you feel a grandparent? Actually, let me ask you this question first. If I am the grandparent and I am starting to realize I think my adult child may have ADHD, what is your advice on how we bring that up?
That's a good question. You know, there are so many adults who, as you know, I don't have to tell you, who learn as adults that they have ADHD,
Hmm.
right? So the first thing I would say is that grandparent better get really educated a little bit.
Hmm.
And when you were talking before about how does the grandparent get educated, I'll just plug my own program, my Common Connected Workshop Series. It's a 7-session workshop series. It's called Common Connected Parenting Children and Teens with ADHD and Executive Function Challenges. The reason I bring it up now is session 1 is a almost 2-hour session on just beyond what you think about with ADHD. It really goes into that social emotional impact of ADHD and executive function challenges so that people experience what ADHD is all about. So that way the grandparent, whether they're, helping their adult child with the grandchild or noticing it in their own child, is going to understand that more. Why do
Hmm.
I say you have to start there? Because before I'm going to start going to tell my child, hey, I think maybe you have ADHD, I better know a little bit more of what I'm talking about than what's out there in terms of inattentive, hyperactive, impulsivity,
Hmm.
all of those other things. I better really have a better understanding. But the
Sure.
second thing is just, again, I hate to keep saying about the curiosity, it's the noticing of, you know, honey, now that you're a parent, I know that this is overwhelming and everything, and we sometimes go back to some of our own initial challenges, or maybe some of those challenges that you've been able to keep in line are really getting hard. I wonder what we can look into that might be helpful without labeling it, and then you
Hmm.
get there.
Great. I want to take a pause with you right now and come back and talk more about what calm and connected is, and if there are some tips that our listeners can take away, and of course, how they can find you. So,
Sure.
ever wondered why helping a loved one declutter feels like speaking different languages? I did, especially with my mom. It wasn't until I founded Silver Linings Transitions, helping San Diego seniors organize and move for over a decade, that I discovered why. We all experience clutter differently, and for those of us with ADHD, it's a whole other world. If you are listening in the San Diego area and feeling stuck with moving, paperwork, photos, or home organization, our team at Silver Linings Transitions gets it. We understand ADHD's unique challenges, and we won't just help you get organized, we'll create sustainable systems that finally stick. Schedule a consultation with our team today at 760-522-1624. That's 760-522-1624, or find us at silverliningstransitions.com. We are back with Cindy Goldrich, and she was about to explain the highlight reel of her Calm and Connected program, and then how you can join it.
Sure. So as I mentioned, it's a 7-session workshop series, and it's meant to help people both understand ADHD and executive function challenges, but beyond that, how do you parent? I mean, parenting is hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Forget
Oh,
grandparenting. Parenting's hard. It's complex, and when you have a complex kid, it's even harder. Parents don't know, am I enabling or supporting my child every time I try to help? And what kind of boundaries are going to help them feel independent and secure, but still be accountable and responsible? And what kind of consequences are going to build skills and not just be punitive? So we
Mm-hmm.
start with foundation, and then we build. We talk about communication and how to collaborate and how to set boundaries and all of those different things. So that's what the workshop's about. And if you want to find out about it, you can just look at my website, which is PTS Coaching. By the way, that stands for Pathways to Success, because I think this is the kind of pathway people with ADHD have. It's not this nice straight
Yeah,
path,
it's
right?
wavy. For those of you who are listening on a podcast, she
I
did
know.
the wave motion with her hand.
Did the wave motion. So yeah, so it's
Yeah.
ptscoaching.com. You can see that if you look under parents, you'll see it. You can always just email me, Cindy, CINDY, at ptscoaching.com. Happy to interact with you.
Wonderful. Do you think that this is something that would help benefit grandparents as well?
Absolutely. I have so many grandparents who take this course as well. Sometimes they take it because they're primary caregivers or supportive caregivers. Sometimes just because they want to understand themselves because, like they're recognizing now that they're seeing their adult child parent and they're living through all that again, they're realizing, I think maybe that was what was going on with me, or that's what was going on with my own child, and I missed it. And
Mhm.
since we know that this is a highly hereditable condition, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Oh,
It's
yeah.
really right. So chances are good that either your child or your grandchild has ADHD or your child's spouse, and you want to
Mhm.
understand your child's spouse a little better,
Sure. You know,
right?
it's interesting. My 17-year-old was just diagnosed. Even though I've known for almost 10 years that I had ADHD, it presents differently. But when I started to look back when she got the diagnosis, I'm like, wait, her report cards really were like mine. She was talking too much in class, and she had some of the social problems that I had. And now it's like, and I told her how lucky she is that she has a mom that understands it, because now I realize when she doesn't clean up after herself, or she makes those little mistakes, that she's really not doing it deliberately. She's not being, defiant. She just is her brain is on a motor like mine is.
Mhm.
And so and I definitely feel like that role of the grandparent, to your point,
Yeah.
it's going to come back to the relationship that you have with your adult child, and it's going to be really important to set that level before we even go into giving advice or criticism, or right. So
And I just want to interject one thing. It is, and ADHD or not, it is never too late to work on that relationship. When you are the grandparent and you've got the child, there's so many layers, as I said. The dynamics are amazing, right? And the child starts to understand their parent better at
mhm.
all stages of life. So it's always a new opportunity to work on your own relationship with your adult child or with your mother,
I
right?
love that. I want to emphasize it is never too late. That's, I've
It's
had people
not.
question why I would do this podcast. A senior has had ADHD their whole life. Why does it matter? And I'm like, why wouldn't you want to make your life better the moment that you
Exactly.
could? You gave me a question. I think it's a great one. It's, what are some practical ways that grandparents can be a source of support for their ADHD grandchild, whether emotionally, academically, or in daily life? That I would love for you to answer that one.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is just get down there and play with them and reflect back what you're hearing. You know, even the nonverbal child, like the very young child, just to be able to say, "Oh, are you feeling overwhelmed? Oh, is this like a lot going on?" And accepting them as they are. Don't try to make them fit into that environment. Maybe let them take you to a new environment.
Hmm.
If you're at one of those, I don't know if you ever took your kids to like the little gym or any of those little
Oh, yeah.
programs,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
when I was a mom the first time, it was like, oh, I want to make sure my child is fitting in with everyone else and doing what they're supposed to. But now, as I take my grandchild and she's interested in something else, it's like, oh, let's explore that too.
Hmm.
It's not fitting into the other mold as much.
Right. I'm not a grandparent, but I have, it's like a stepchild. So I am in a blended family. I have a partner who has a daughter. And it's been really interesting for me because I'm not her mother to take on the role of that bonus, not parent, but bonus person. And I'm really there for her. And I'm not attached to the outcome. So if she only wants to wear comfortable clothes that don't have itchy tags, I'm good. Like, I'm not concerned about how she's going to look in that picture. So I imagine that that's more of the role that a grandparent takes. It's just, I get to be there. And, I think there are so many grandparents that are that safe space
Yeah.
for, because the parent is involved in all of the things that go with parenting. And also, as we age, we have wisdom. And even though I'm not a grandparent, I'm 55, and I definitely have the wisdom that goes with, living for 55 years. Are there any questions that you feel like our listeners we need to address before we end? Because there's nothing worse than finishing something and saying, I wish I had said this.
Questions. Yeah, I mean, aside from the fact that, as I said, it's never too late. It's never too late to get that diagnosis. It's never too late to get support. And support is not just medication. Medication is a tool in the toolbox. It's the education. It's the coaching. I mean, I have coaches who work with high school and college kids. I have coaches who work with parents in their role as parenting. I have coaches that work with adults in their role as being the adult, because we all could use a coach. We all could use that. So the question I have for the people that are listening is, what is it that you want better in your life? And how are you going to get there? Is it through knowledge? Is it through support? Is it through just a little grace and accepting yourself and saying, you know what, I'm doing the best I can and I'm going to do better tomorrow?
Mm-hmm. I love that. I always have found that you really see who somebody is when they make a mistake and they atone for that mistake. They make it right. You see them walk through that mistake. And, my kids see me do it all the time, and I don't hide it from them. I'm like, they're going to learn, from my experience. Sometimes we have to learn the hard way, but, I always want, if I can, to spare my children from that. And I would imagine grandparents especially want to, buffer those kids and give them the caffeine and the puppy dogs and all the love, and then, send them back. Any other parting thoughts for our listeners? Again, they can find you at ptscoaching.com. And that you do have that calm and connected workshop that you said a lot of grandparents participate in.
And if anyone out there feels like, you know what, my kids are grown, I do want to do this, I'm curious about helping other parents or teaching other teachers, then look into my professional programs as well, because this is a growing field. There are a lot of people, as you know, who are first recognizing their challenges, and they want and they deserve the support. So
absolutely. I'm so glad that we have this awareness now. And I appreciate your, parent the child that you have and not the one that you thought you were going to have. Thank you so much, Cindy, for being part of this conversation.
absolutely.
And for supporting the people who are listening who truly are grandmas, because I've said, you don't have to be a grandparent to listen. You don't, and I appreciate it. And it is never too late to improve yourself and learn and make the rest of your life the best of your life. If you liked this podcast, please subscribe to it and let me know what your thoughts are. And you can find our growing Facebook community at Grandma Has ADHD, and that's on Facebook. Thanks so much for tuning in. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, Call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The hosts, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.